The bus stop stood like a quiet island, amid the moving rhythm of Doha. Glass panels shimmered under the intense midday sun, reflecting towers of steel and stone that rose confidently against a pale blue sky. The air was warm, dry, and heavy with the faint scent of dust and distant traffic. Buses arrived and departed with clockwork precision, doors hissing open, then closing again as commuters stepped in and out of the shade. Keanu Reeves stood beneath the shelter, slightly apart from the others. He wore light-colored clothes, suited for the heat, sunglasses shielding his eyes, as he leaned casually against the glass wall. To most passers-by, he looked like just another travel acquiesce. Thoughtful, unremarkable. Fame had taught him how to disappear in plain sight. Here, among tourists, office workers, and laborers heading home, anonymity felt natural. He watched the city move. A digital sign above the stop blinked, with arrival times in Arabic and English. Somewhere nearby, a vendor poured tea into small paper cups. A group of workers laughed softly, sharing a joke Keanu couldn't quite hear. Life unfolded in small, ordinary fragments, the kind of moments people rarely remember, yet make up most of living. Keanu checked his phone, then slipped it back into his pocket. He wasn't in a hurry. This pause, this stillness, was welcome. He had always liked public transport in foreign cities. It grounded him, reminded him that the world was larger than film sets and schedules. A bus passed without stopping, its reflection sliding across the glass behind him. Keanu adjusted his stance, feeling the heat radiate through the pavement. His thoughts drifted about travel, about time, about how strange it was that a life lived so publicly could still contain pockets of quiet like this. No one recognized him yet. A woman sat on the bench nearby, scrolling through her phone. A man in a pressed white shirt checked his watch repeatedly. A student adjusted a backpack strap and stared down the road, waiting for the next bus. No one looked twice at Keanu, and that suited him just fine. Then something shifted. It was subtle at first, a change in sound, more than sight. The steady hum of traffic slowed near the curb. Tires rolled more carefully. Engines idled longer than necessary. Keanu felt it before he saw it. The way you feel a storm before the clouds fully gather. Lost, they didn't look rushed. They looked purposeful. The laughter nearby faded. Conversations softened. A few heads turned. Doors opened. And as uniformed figures stepped into the sun, their attention focused unmistakably on him. The stillness of the bus stop deepened into something heavier. An unspoken pause before a story no one there had expected to witness. In that suspended moment, beneath the blazing Qatar sky, Keanu Reeves was no longer just waiting for a bus. He was standing at the edge of something that would follow him far beyond this quiet stop and change everything that came after. The vehicles came to a complete stop beside the curb, engines humming softly, almost politely. They were black, unmarked. Their surfaces, absorbing the sunlight rather than reflecting it. For a brief moment, nothing happened. The bus stop remained frozen in a collective hesitation, as if everyone present sensed that moving too soon would somehow make things worse. Then the doors opened. Men stepped out first, followed by a woman, all dressed in neutral tones that blended authority with anonymity. No logos, no raised voices, just clipped movements and alert eyes scanning the area. They wore earphones, and one of them spoke quietly into a wrist-mounted device in Arabic. His tone low and controlled. Keanu watched without reacting. He had been around security details before film premieres. Diplomatic events, controlled chaos, disguised as order. This was different. There was no perimeter set for protection, no attempt to shield a crowd. Their focus was narrow, precise, and unmistakably aimed at one place. At him. A faint ripple of unease passed through the commuters. The man in the white shirt took a step back. The student shifted his weight, gripping his backpack tighter. The woman on the bench finally looked up from her phone. Her eyes flicking from the vehicles to the officers, and then to Keanu. The officers moved forward together, not rushing, not hesitating. Their shoes made soft, deliberate sounds against the pavement. One of them nodded slightly, as if confirming what he already knew. Keanu removed his sunglasses. It wasn't fear that made him do it, it was instinct. He wanted to see clearly, to read faces. To understand what was happening before words were exchanged. The heat hit his eyes immediately, but he didn't look away. An officer stopped a few feet in front of him. "Mr. Reeves," he said politely, his English smooth and formal. "Please remain where you are." The sound of Keanu's name broke the stillness like glass. Murmurs rose around the bus stop. Heads turned fully now. Phones emerged slowly, almost hesitantly. As if people were unsure whether they were witnessing something real. "Yes," Keanu replied calmly. "We need to ask you a few questions," the officer continued. His posture was respectful, but his stance left no doubt this was not a request. Keanu glanced briefly around. The exits of the bus stop were screen-flashed lines of text, and a photograph that made Keanu's chest tighten slightly. It was him or someone who looked exactly like him. "Captured by a surveillance camera," said. Keanu nodded once, slowly. "Then let's clarify them." As the officers signaled to one another and prepared to escort him aside. The realization settled in, not just for Keanu but for everyone watching. This wasn't routine. This was the beginning of something far larger. Then a few questions at a bus stop on whatever had brought these unmarked vehicles. Here had already been set in motion long before Keanu ever stepped into the shade that day. The first touch came gently, almost apologetically. An officer placed a hand just above Keanu's elbow, a grip. Not yet guiding him a step away from the bus stop bench, and closer to the curb. The gesture was calm, practiced, and unmistakably official. It was the moment when curiosity tipped into certainty for everyone watching. This was real. Is something wrong? A commuter asked aloud, his voice cracking the silence. No one answered. Keanu followed the guidance without resistance. He had always believed that calm revealed more than confrontation. And whatever this situation was, panic would only blur the truth. He stood straight, shoulders relaxed, eyes alert. The officers positioned themselves around him not aggressively, but with intention. A quiet perimeter formed. One officer spoke again, lowering his voice. "Mr. Reeves, you are being temporarily detained while we verify certain information." "Detained?" Keanu repeated softly. "Yes, sir." The word traveled faster than sound. Detained, it rippled through the bus stop. Translated instantly into fear, fascination, disbelief. A woman raised her phone higher. Another stepped back, as if the moment itself might be contagious. Keanu felt the sun on the back of his neck as the officer behind him reached for something metallic. The click was unmistakable. Handcuffs closed around his wrists, not tight, not cruel, but final. The sound echoed far louder than it should have. Sharp against the glass and concrete. A gasp escaped from somewhere in the crowd. Someone whispered his name, barely audible, but heavy with emotion. Keanu looked down briefly at the cuffs, then back up. His expression didn't change, but something deeper shifted behind his eyes. Confusion, yes, but also awareness. This was no misunderstanding that would dissolve with a quick explanation. "What is this about?" he asked evenly. The officer in front of him hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. "We'll explain everything shortly," he said. "Please cooperate." "I am cooperating," Keanu replied. The officers began to escort him toward the waiting vehicles. Their movements were smooth, rehearsed, designed to minimize disruption, but disruption had already taken hold. The bus that had just arrived slowed, its doors remaining closed as the driver stared. Passengers pressed their faces to the windows. He demanded. An officer raised a hand, not threatening, just firm. "Please step back." The heat seemed to intensify, pressing down on the moment. Sweat beaded on foreheads. Time stretched. Every step Keanu took felt magnified, as if the ground itself were recording it. Outside, the bus stop remained suspended in disbelief. Phones continued recording. Questions hung unanswered in the air. And as the vehicles pulled away from the curb, one truth settled unmistakably among the witnesses left behind. What they had just seen was not the end of a routine stop. It was the opening scene of a story the world was about to watch frame by frame. The moment the SUVs pulled away, the bus stop exhaled, but the tension did not leave. It lingered, heavy and electric, as if the air itself had been altered by what everyone had just witnessed. For several seconds, no one spoke. People stood exactly where they were, phones still raised, eyes fixed on the empty stretch of road where the vehicles had disappeared. Then the noise returned all at once. "Did that really just happen?" someone asked in disbelief. "That was him. That was actually him. Why would they arrest him here?" Voices overlapped in multiple languages, confusion spilling out faster than it could be organized into sense. Commuters replayed the videos they had just recorded. Zooming in on Keanu's face, the handcuffs, the calm way he had walked. The footage felt unreal even on their own screens, like a scene lifted from a movie, rather than a bus stop under the Qatar sun. A woman sat down heavily on the bench Keanu had been standing near moments earlier. Her hands trembled slightly as she typed, sending the video to friends, family, anyone who would believe her. Nearby, a man shook his head over and over, muttering that something like this didn't just happen by accident. The bus finally opened its doors. No one moved. The driver leaned out, scanning the crowd. "Is everyone getting on or not?" he called, his voice uncertain. A few people stepped forward hesitantly, but most stayed behind, unwilling to leave the place where the moment had occurred, as if staying might somehow explain it. The digital sign blinked, announcing another arrival, indifferent to human shock. Recognition spread quickly now. Someone pulled up an image online, comparing it side by side with the man they had just seen. The resemblance was undeniable. Gasps followed. A murmur grew louder, sharper. It really was Keanu Reeves. The realization hit harder than the arrest itself. This wasn't just a stranger detained by authorities. This was a global figure, someone associated with kindness, humility, trust. If someone like him could be taken so publicly, so calmly, what did that say about the systems operating quietly around them every day? Crime scene. That alone fueled speculation. Didn't resist. He looked confused. "This doesn't feel right." The phrase echoed online within moments. Across the city and, then across the world, the footage began to circulate. Cropped, slowed, captioned. Headlines formed from fragments of truth and layers of assumption. Some called it a misunderstanding. Others called it proof that no one was untouchable. Back at the bus stop, the sun continued its steady descent. Shadows shifted. Life tried to resume. But for those who had been there, something fundamental had changed. They hadn't just witnessed an arrest. They had witnessed certainty there on the pavement, behind a question that refused to settle. If this could happen here, in the open, to someone everyone thought they knew, what else was happening, just out of sight? The facility they brought Keanu to was quiet in a way that felt intentional. Smooth white corridors absorbed sound. Footsteps barely echoing, as officers guided him forward. The air was cool, a sharp contrast to the heat of the bus stop, and it carried the faint hum of electronics working behind unseen walls. Keanu was seated in a small conference room rather than a cell. The handcuffs were removed. But the door remained closed, guarded from the outside. A screen on the wall flickered to life as two senior officials entered. Their expressions composed, their movements measured. "Mr. Reeves," one of them began, taking a seat across from him. "You have been detained in connection with an international investigation." "Into what?" Keanu asked calmly. The official pressed a button on the tablet in front of him. A digital map appeared, highlighting transit hubs across several countries. Lines connected stations, servers, and financial nodes, forming a web that looked more like a system than a crime. "Public transportation infrastructure," the official said. "Specifically, biometric link surveillance and digital authorization systems." Keanu frowned slightly. "I don't work in that field." "That's precisely the point," the second official replied. They explained carefully, choosing their words with legal precision. A series of high-value financial transactions had been authorized using biometric confirmations, facial recognition, voice verification, movement patterns captured through smart transit systems. The authorizations traced back to a single identity. Keanu leaned back slowly. The screen changed. Surveillance footage played grainy, but clear enough. A man stood at a transit terminal, his posture unmistakable. His face was Keanu's face. His voice, played next, was Keanu's voice, granting access to systems worth millions. Instead, they showed him travel records, digital confirmations, all seemingly aligned. The evidence was disturbingly clean. Every data point supported the same narrative. That he had been present. That he had authorized access. That the system had done exactly what it was designed to do. "That's what worries me," Keanu said quietly. "Systems don't make mistakes this perfect." One of the officials studied him more closely now. "You believe this is a fabrication?" "I believe it's a construction," Keanu replied. "Built from pieces of my life." Silence followed. Finally, the official spoke again. "Until we determine how your identity was involved, you will remain in custody. Your cooperation will be noted." Keanu nodded slowly. "Then start looking for who benefits from this," he said. "Because it isn't me." As the officials gathered their devices and left the room, Keanu was alone again, staring at the darkened screen. Somewhere within those lines of data, someone had turned his face into a key, one that unlocked doors he had never even known existed. And now, that key had been traced back to him. The story broke before the sun had fully set over Doha. What began as a handful of shaky phone videos from a bus stop erupted into a global, Media event within hours. Clips were uploaded, reposted, slowed down, and captioned in dozens of languages. The moment Keanu Reeves was handcuffed beneath the glass shelter became the defining image. Paused, zoomed, analyzed frame by frame. Keanu Reeves, detained in Qatar, scrolled across news banners. Major networks cut into regular programming. Anchors struggled to balance urgency with caution, repeating the same verified facts again and again because there were so few of them. Social media filled the gaps instantly. Speculation racing ahead of confirmation. Was it a misunderstanding? A political issue? A cybercrime scandal? No one knew, but everyone had an opinion. Fans reacted first, and fiercely. Messages of disbelief flooded every platform. Old interviews resurfaced. Clips of Keanu speaking about humility, kindness, and privacy shared millions of times as proof of character. This doesn't add up trended worldwide within an hour. Others were less patient. Commentators demanded transparency, pointing to the seriousness of the allegations now leaking through unnamed sources. Words like biometric fraud and transnational finance entered everyday conversation, stripped of nuance and repackaged as suspicion. In studios across the world, experts appeared via video, linked cybersecurity analysts, legal scholars, former intelligence officers. They spoke carefully, warning viewers how advanced identity replication had become, how public figures were uniquely vulnerable in a world saturated with data. Your face is no longer just your face, one analyst said. It's a password. Inside the secure facility, Keanu was allowed limited access to the coverage. A muted television showed his own image on loop. The arrest replayed endlessly while others spoke for him. Watching himself from the outside felt disorienting. Like observing a character he didn't recognize, but shared his name. Embassies, studios paused projects quietly. Legal teams issued brief statements, emphasizing cooperation and respect for local authorities. Every word was scrutinized, every silence interpreted. By nightfall, the bus stop itself had become a symbol. Photos of the glass shelter circulated with red circles and arrows. People stood there to take pictures, to point, to say this is where it happened. Ordinary infrastructure had been transformed into a landmark of uncertainty. As the story spread, one truth became impossible to ignore. This was no longer just about Keanu Reeves. It was about how quickly reputation could be questioned, how effortlessly technology could manufacture certainty, and how eagerly the world consumed both. And somewhere behind the headlines, in a quiet room, far from the noise, Keanu understood that the fight ahead would not be against accusation alone, but against a system that had already decided how convincing a lie could be. The holding room was smaller than Keanu expected, windowless, designed more for observation than comfort. A narrow table sat bolted to the floor. Two chairs facing one another beneath a soft white light that never dimmed. The walls were swallowing every noise except the steady rhythm of his own breathing. Time moved differently here. Without windows or clocks, minutes stretched into something abstract. Keanu sat still, hands resting loosely on the table. His thoughts sharper than he let his expression show. He replayed the arrest in his mind, the officer's restraint, the precision, the confidence. None of it felt improvised. This had been planned, timed, executed with certainty. The door opened quietly. Two officials entered, neither of the ones from before. These were analysts, less rigid, more observant. One carried a tablet, the other a slim folder filled with printed logs. "We're going to review timelines," one of them said. "Not accusations. Facts." Keanu nodded. "That's all I want." They began laying out data: travel records, appearance schedules, security logs from hotels, airports, events. Each entry was precise, time-stamped down to the second. Keanu followed closely, noting details even they seemed to overlook. Then he saw it. "Pause there," he said. The analyst stopped the playback. "This authorization," Keanu continued, pointing to the screen. "You're saying I made that here in Doha, at 14:12. "Yes," the analyst replied. "Confirmed by transit biometrics." Keanu leaned forward. "14 12. I was on a live video call. Publicly streamed. Recorded from 2 locations. You can verify it." The analysts exchanged a glance. They cross-checked quickly. The footage appeared. Keanu was right, same minute, same second. 2 undeniable records claiming his presence in 2 different places. "That's impossible," one of them muttered. "Exactly," Keanu said quietly. They dug deeper. More overlaps surfaced. Small at first, easy to miss, but once seen, impossible to ignore. The system had compensated. Smoothing contradictions automatically. Rewriting logs to preserve consistency. Not malicious on its own, but exploitable. "This isn't just identity theft," the analyst said slowly. "It's identity substitution." Keanu felt a chill. "Someone didn't steal my identity," he said. "They replaced." The room grew heavy with realization. Whoever was behind this understood the system better than the people enforcing it. They knew how to make the data agree with itself even when reality didn't, and they knew exactly whose face would never be questioned. One analyst stood. "We need to escalate this." Before leaving, he turned back to Keanu. "You just changed the direction of this case." The door closed again, but this time the silence felt different. Keanu leaned back, exhaling slowly. For the first time since the bus stop, a crack had appeared, not in his resolve, but in the story built against him. Somewhere in the machinery of certainty, doubt had entered. The change came quietly, almost politely. When the door opened this time, it wasn't accompanied by the firm footsteps of authority or the neutral expressions of analysts. Only one person entered, a woman in her early 40s, dressed simply, no visible insignia, carrying nothing but a thin tablet held close to her chest. She closed the door behind her herself. "My name is Layla Hassan," she said. "Cybertransit Oversight. International Division." Keanu stood slightly, then sat again. "You're not here to question me." "No," Layla replied. "I'm here because the questions finally reached the wrong place." She took the seat opposite him, her eyes sharp but tired. The look of someone who had been awake far too long, not from stress, but from responsibility. "I've been tracking anomalies in biometric transit systems for 3 years," she continued. "They appear and disappear. Logs rewrite themselves. Alerts vanish before audits can flag them." Keanu listened carefully. "We thought it was corruption," Layla said. "Then we thought it was incompetence. But after today, I know what it is." She tapped her tablet. A diagram appeared: public transport hubs across continents, connected by invisible digital pathways. Certain faces were highlighted. Keanu's was the largest. "They're using high-trust identities as masks," she said. "Famous faces. Familiar voices. People no one questions. Your biometric profile is everywhere: interviews, films, speeches. It's the perfect training data. Keanu felt a quiet anger settle in his chest. So they hid behind me. Yes, Layla said. And behind others. But you're the first case that couldn't be smoothed over. Too visible. Too many independent records. She hesitated, then added, and someone on the inside helped them. Keanu looked up sharply. Who? I don't have a name yet, Layla said. But I know where to look. Transit authorization doesn't rewrite itself. Someone gave the system permission to lie. She leaned forward. I shouldn't be telling you this. Officially, this conversation isn't happening. Then why are you? Keanu asked. Layla met his gaze. Because if this continues, identity becomes obsolete. Anyone can be anyone with the right data. And today, it was you. Silence filled the room, heavier than before. Layla stood. I've submitted a sealed report. Once it opens, things will move fast. Not clean but fast. Before leaving, she paused. You didn't just expose a flaw, she said. You forced it into the light. The door closed. Keanu remained seated, absorbing the weight of what he had learned. This wasn't a single crime or a single network. It was a warning, one written in code, faces, and trust. The room felt different, nor not smaller, not larger, but charged. As if the walls themselves were aware that the narrative had shifted. Hours passed before the door opened again. This time, it was not quietly. 3 officials entered together, accompanied by legal representatives and a uniformed liaison from an international oversight body. Their posture was no longer neutral. There was urgency in their movements, tension in their clipped exchanges before they sat down. Mr. Reeves, the senior official said, folding his hands. The status of your detention has changed. Keanu remained still. How? The investigation is no longer focused on you as a suspect. The official continued carefully. You are now considered a material witness. A subtle but seismic shift. They laid out what had happened since Layla's report was unsealed. Independent auditors had been granted emergency access to transit and financial authorization. Systems across multiple regions. What they found could no longer be contained. The same pattern repeated everywhere. Biometric confirmations that verified perfectly to perfectly. Logs that adjusted themselves to remove contradictions. Oversight alerts that were quietly rerouted or delayed. And always high-trust identities at the center, acting as digital signatures for actions they had never taken. Keanu's case had broken the illusion because it happened in public. Your arrest created external records we couldn't control, one official admitted. Too many cameras. Too many witnesses. Too much real-world data. For the first time, someone said it plainly. An arrest that was meant to be routine had exposed a system-wide vulnerability. You're being released from custody today, the legal representative added. Your movements will remain restricted temporarily, but you are free. Keanu exhaled slowly, not in relief, but in focus. And the people who did this? The officials exchanged looks. We're closing in, one said. But understand this network doesn't operate like traditional crime. It embeds itself into systems designed for efficiency and trust. Keanu stood. Then those systems need to change. There was a pause. Emergency protocols are being drafted. Biometric-only authorization is being suspended in several regions. Outside the facility, Night had fully fallen. The city lights reflected off glass and steel. Doha humming, as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. But Keanu knew better. Before he was escorted out, Layla appeared briefly in the corridor. She didn't stop, didn't speak aloud, only met his eyes, and gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was enough. As Keanu stepped into the open air, cameras flashed from a distance, held back by barriers and security. He didn't raise his hands or make a statement. He simply walked. The world had already seen him arrested. Soon, it would see something far more unsettling, the realization that in a digital age, innocence could be overwritten as easily as The official statement came the next morning. It was brief, carefully worded, and unmistakably historic. Authorities confirmed that Keanu Reeves had been released and cleared of wrongdoing. The investigation, they said, had uncovered systemic misuse of biometric authorization frameworks, spanning multiple countries. No names were announced yet, but arrests were imminent. Oversight bodies promised reforms. Committees were formed. Safeguards were pledged. The world listened and then asked harder questions. How many decisions had been made by machines trained on faces rather than facts? How many lives had been quietly altered by data that appeared flawless but wasn't true? Keanu watched the coverage from a private residence, the volume low. He didn't need to hear the commentary. The images told the story well enough. His arrest replayed beside his release. Certainty replaced by doubt, confidence by caution. Messages poured in from around the world, colleagues, friends, strangers. Some offered support. Others apologized for believing the headlines too quickly. Keanu read a few, then set the phone aside. What stayed with him wasn't anger, it was clarity. Weeks later, the deeper truth emerged. An internal task force revealed that a covert network had embedded itself inside transit tech development contracts, quietly altering authorization hierarchies. Their goal wasn't chaos. It was invisibility. By using trusted biometric identities, especially public figures, they had turned recognition into a weapon. Systems obeyed because they were designed to. Several officials resigned. Others were detained. International regulations were limiting how biometric data could be used, stored, and trusted. For the first time, a global moratorium on autonomous biometric authorization was seriously debated. All because one arrest had happened in public. Keanu eventually spoke, but not at a press conference. He released a short written statement. Technology should serve truth, not replace it. Trust should be earned, not assumed by a face. I was fortunate. Others may not be. Let's build systems that protect people, not profiles. The words spread quietly, without spectacle. And somehow, that made them louder. Months later, the bus stop in Doha looked ordinary again. The tape was gone. The cameras had moved on. Commuters waited beneath the glass shelter, checking phones, watching the road. But the systems above and beneath that pavement were no longer the same. Every biometric scan now carried a question where certainty once lived. And far away, back to his life, but forever changed. Keanu understood something few ever did. That the most dangerous prisons were not made of walls or bars, but of assumptions written into code. This time the code had been rewritten. Not because a machine failed,